how I bought my Bugatti back, how I really crashed, how Bugatti is basically cornering me and giving me an ultimatum, and how parts were stolen off of my Bugatti and how I got them back by one simple message.
Nobody believed this was possible. And then suddenly, Alex Gonzalez said something no one saw coming. But this didn't start here. Just days ago, everything seemed normal. And now Mat Armstrong is at the center of a truth.
We're opening a lawsuit against you because
Mat Armstrong.
Over 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, 240 million views.
People aren't ready to hear. Alex Gonzalez didn't just speak. He revealed a moment that had been hidden for a long time. A moment where everything quietly shifted, but no one noticed. The real question is, why did it stay buried until now? This isn't just another statement. It's something much bigger. Stay with us, because what comes next might change everything you thought you knew. Silent gap. It didn't start with a loud claim or a shocking announcement. It started with something far more subtle: silence. A pause in the usual flow of content that felt slightly longer than normal. But not enough for most people to question it at first. Then a short clip appeared, almost casually dropped into the timeline. Within seconds of watching it, a few sharp-eyed viewers felt something was not aligning the way it usually does. The sequence of events didn't follow the natural order people were used to seeing. A key step in the process seemed to be missing entirely, yet the result was already shown as complete. There was no clear bridge between what should have happened and what was being displayed. It created a strange gap in understanding. Not obvious at first glance, but noticeable when you slowed things down and looked again. Mat Armstrong continued presenting the situation as normal. His tone remained steady.
Here is the front of a Bugatti Chiron Persport, and here is the rear of a Bugatti Chiron Persport, and today we've got to connect both of them together.
Calm and confident, just like in his previous uploads. The video carried the same energy his audience had come to expect: progress, transformation, and a finished result that looked satisfying on the surface. For the majority of viewers, nothing seemed wrong. It was just another successful build, another clean outcome, another story of effort turning into results. But not everyone saw it that way. A smaller group of viewers, the ones who usually pay attention to timing, cuts, and transitions, began to pause and re-watch specific sections. They were not reacting emotionally. They were simply trying to understand what filled the gap between one moment and the next. And the more they re-watched, the more that missing piece stood out. It wasn't explained. It wasn't shown. It simply wasn't there. That absence created the first layer of doubt. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, uncomfortable way. Because when something important is skipped, even once, it makes people question whether they missed it or whether it was never shown at all. And that difference matters. As discussions slowly started forming in comment sections and online threads, the questions became more structured. Why was there no visible transition between stages? Why did certain complex parts appear resolved without any detailed explanation? Why did the timeline feel slightly compressed in areas where detail was expected? These were not accusations, but observations repeated by multiple viewers who had no connection to each other. Then came something even more subtle, but far more impactful. A comment appeared briefly under the video. It wasn't extraordinary on its own, but it mentioned a specific detail about the process. Within a short time, it was gone. And not just the comment, but also a reply that followed it. For those who saw it before it disappeared, it left behind more questions than answers. Moments later, another small interaction changed the tone again. A reply notification appeared, then vanished almost immediately. These weren't large events. They were small digital traces, but together they created an uncomfortable pattern. it started to feel like parts of the conversation were not just fading away, but being adjusted while the audience was still watching. This is the point where perception began to shift. It was no longer just about a single video or a single build. It became about consistency, transparency, and what is shown versus what is left out. Once attention moved from surface-level viewing to detailed observation, every small gap started to matter more than before. And in situations like this, even the smallest missing detail can change how the entire story is understood. Bugatti shift. The turning point came with one project that was impossible to ignore: the Bugatti. A car that sits at the highest level of engineering, known worldwide for its extreme value.
In the atelier, Bugatti builds one of the fastest, most expensive production cars in the world, the Chiron, which they test drive on mountain roads nearby.
Rare parts, and the precision needed to even touch its structure. This wasn't just another rebuild. It was a project that automatically carried pressure from the very beginning, because everything about it demanded time, experience, and full transparency. From the moment the first updates were released, the reaction was immediate. The visuals looked clean, the progress seemed smooth, and the results appeared to come together faster than expected. On the surface, it looked like a perfect example of skill and efficiency. But for those who understood the nature of such a machine, that speed became the first point of concern. In real conditions, a car like a Bugatti cannot be repaired in simple, short steps. Every section involves advanced systems, rare components, and detailed calibration. Nothing moves quickly in a natural workflow. Even small fixes require inspection, testing, and repeated adjustments. Yet in the content being shown, several of those stages appeared compressed or missing entirely. Mat Armstrong framed the project as a difficult challenge, something that pushed limits and tested capability. But the outcome appeared in a way that made the timeline feel unusually short. Some viewers appreciated this, seeing it as proof of high-level expertise. Others, however, began to feel that something was being left out of the full picture. As people rewatched the footage, specific moments started to stand out. Certain mechanical parts seemed to change condition without a detailed explanation of how the transformation happened. In some cases, entire steps were not shown at all, replaced instead by quick transitions that moved directly from damaged to completed states. While this can sometimes happen in edited content, the repetition of such gaps created curiosity. These observations didn't immediately turn into accusations. Instead, they became questions. Why were some of the most technical stages not shown? Why did the timeline feel inconsistent when compared to the complexity of the work? And why did the process feel more like a highlight reel than a full breakdown of engineering work? This is where the discussion started to grow beyond a single video, and the Bugatti project became a reference point. Viewers began comparing it with earlier builds, revisiting older uploads, and analyzing how processes were shown in the past. The focus shifted from one moment to a larger pattern across multiple projects. The more comparisons people made, the more similarities they thought they noticed. The gaps were not identical, but they followed a familiar structure: fast transitions, missing steps, and compressed timelines. None of this alone confirmed anything concrete, but together it created a consistent feeling of uncertainty. And once that feeling sets in, it becomes difficult to ignore. Because even if the work is real, the way it is presented starts to shape how people interpret the truth behind it. The message twist. Just as the situation reached its peak, and the conversation around the Bugatti case was already spreading fast.
Quick fire questions.
Yep.
What is the one car that if it was crashed and an ability to fix, you would absolutely love to have a go at?
Bugatti Veyron, 100%.
A new detail entered the story and completely changed its direction. A message, reportedly linked to a high-level source, began circulating across online discussions. It didn't arrive through any official statement or public clarification. There was no video, no announcement, and no structured explanation. Instead, it appeared quietly in fragments, shared from one account to another, almost as if it was never meant to be seen so widely. That silence around its origin made it even more powerful in the eyes of viewers. The content of the message itself did not directly confirm any accusation or final truth. It was not written in a way that made bold claims. Instead, it hinted at something more indirect. It suggested that certain parts of the process, especially behind the scenes, might not have been fully shown to the public. It left space for interpretation rather than clear answers. And in situations like this, even a small hint can shift the entire direction of a discussion. Up until this point, most of what people were talking about was based on visible content. Videos, edits, timelines, and replays formed the foundation of all arguments. Everything was being analyzed through observation. But this message introduced something different. It created the idea that there could be internal knowledge information coming from inside the circle rather than outside speculation. That alone was enough to change how people were thinking about the situation. Alex Gonzalez stepped into this moment with caution, and he didn't treat the message as final proof, nor did he ignore it completely. Instead, he broke it down slowly. He looked at when it appeared, how it started spreading, and how it connected with earlier concerns that had already been discussed. His approach stayed analytical, focusing on structure rather than emotion. The timing of the message became one of the most important points in the entire discussion. It surfaced right after viewers had already started questioning inconsistencies in the Bugatti project. This timing made people wonder whether it was a coincidence or reaction. If it had appeared earlier, it might have been ignored. If it had come later, it might have lost impact. But appearing exactly during a rising wave of questions gave it weight. Reactions from the audience were divided. A group of viewers believed this message added credibility to the concerns. To them, it felt like confirmation that not everything had been fully transparent. Another group pushed back, arguing that the message could be misunderstood, taken out of context, or even exaggerated as it spread through social platforms. Both sides had different interpretations, but neither could fully dismiss its presence. What remained consistent, however, was the effect it had on the overall discussion. Instead of calming the situation, it intensified it. The uncertainty grew stronger, and the conversation became more layered. At this stage, the story was no longer limited to visible content or video analysis. It had moved into a space where private communication, indirect hints, and public perception were all mixing. And when those boundaries blur, and control over the narrative becomes much harder, because every new detail adds another layer to an already complex situation. Alex's reveal. When Alex Gonzalez finally stepped forward with his full explanation, the tone was noticeably controlled and structured from the very beginning. There was no emotional outburst, no dramatic framing, and no attempt to turn it into entertainment. Instead, he built his points step by step, almost like laying out a timeline that viewers could follow without confusion. Each claim he made was tied to something visible on screen.
The problem with Bugatti is that they don't want the value of their brand to go down. They don't want somebody like me, somebody like Mat Armstrong to come and touch on this car.
Something that people could go back and check for themselves. Rather than positioning himself as someone attacking or accusing Mat Armstrong, he focused on the process behind the content. His attention was on how the builds were presented, not on personal criticism. And he pointed out moments where certain steps in the process appeared incomplete or missing. He highlighted sections where the timeline of events did not fully align with what would normally be expected in such detailed mechanical work. Most importantly, he avoided making final judgments. Instead of saying something was definitively wrong, he framed his points as questions. Why was this step not shown? Why did this transition appear sudden? Why did the sequence feel compressed in certain parts? This method changed the entire tone of the discussion. It removed the emotional weight and replaced it with observation. Because of this approach, the audience response also began to shift. People did not feel like they were being pulled into a controversy. Instead, they felt like they were being guided through an analysis. It created a slower, a more careful way of thinking about the situation. One of the strongest parts of his breakdown was the idea of consistency. He didn't limit his observations to a single video or one specific project. Instead, he showed that similar patterns could be seen across multiple builds. The gaps were not identical, but they shared a similar structure, missing explanations, shortened transitions, and unclear process steps. Over time, these repeated elements started to form a pattern that was difficult to ignore. He also explained something important about editing. In modern content creation, editing can completely change how a process is understood. A simple cut can remove hours of work. A skipped segment can make a complex repair look effortless. A rearranged sequence can change the viewer's perception of time. So none of this automatically means dishonesty, but it does affect how the audience interprets reality. As his explanation spread, the reaction was not instant. It built slowly. Viewers began going back to older videos, watching them again with a more critical eye. Discussions started appearing across different platforms and comparisons became more common. People were no longer just watching new uploads, they were re-evaluating everything they had already seen. In the end, this wasn't just a reveal of details, it was a shift in perspective, where viewers began to question not only what they were seeing, but how they were seeing it. Alex profile. To fully understand the weight of this situation, it's necessary to look at the person behind the investigation, Alex Gonzalez. But he is not someone who builds attention through quick reactions or emotional statements. Instead, his reputation comes from a slower and more careful approach, one that relies on patience, detail, and repeated observation rather than instant judgment. He does not focus on creating noise or chasing viral moments. His method is more structured. He builds a clear timeline of events by studying content closely, often watching the same material multiple times. During this process, he pays attention to small changes that most viewers might overlook. Even minor differences in editing, sequence, or explanation are noted and compared. Over time, these details are placed side by side to form a complete picture. His background is strongly rooted in observation rather than reaction. While many people respond immediately to trends or headlines, and he takes a different path. He looks beyond what is shown on the surface and tries to understand what might be happening behind it. This approach requires time and focus, but it often leads to more structured conclusions that are easier to follow and analyze. What makes his role stand out in this situation is consistency. He did not appear suddenly with a single claim or an emotional reaction. Instead, he gradually built his perspective step by step. Each observation was connected to the next, forming a chain of points that viewers could trace clearly. This slow and connected structure made his analysis easier to understand and harder to dismiss. His tone throughout the process also played an important role in how his message was received. He remained calm, even when discussing uncertain or questionable moments. And there was no dramatic language, no exaggerated wording, and no attempt to create conflict. Instead, he focused on presenting information in a simple, direct, and organized way. This gave his points more credibility in the eyes of many viewers. Because of this style, his reveal did not gain attention through shock alone. It gained attention through stability. People were not reacting to loud claims. They were responding to carefully structured observations that built up over time. That difference changed how the audience engaged with the situation. In cases like this, the way information is presented can be just as important as the information itself. A calm and structured explanation encourages people to think more deeply rather than react emotionally. And in this situation, that presentation made viewers slow down, re-watch details, and reconsider what they thought they already understood. What started as a simple reveal has turned into something much deeper. Alex Gonzalez didn't just share a statement. He opened a discussion that continues to grow. And at the center of it, Mat Armstrong remains a key figure whose story is still unfolding. The facts we explored today show one thing clearly. There is always more beneath the surface. Now the question is, what comes next? Will more details come out, or will the full truth stay hidden? If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay with us, because this story may not be over yet.